Here are the top stories for today, June 22nd, 2021. Not wanting to get vaccinated, President Rodrigo Duterte says those refusing the jabs are free to leave the country, saying they are potential coronavirus carriers. It's final, the use of face shields will remain as the country tightens measures to prevent the spread of more transmissible COVID-19 variants. Waiting for the scrapping of quarantine classifications? Not so fast, as the Health Department says. This long-term goal needs a well-orchestrated plan to prevent another surge of infections. And reviving tourism, Baguio City logs more tourist arrival following the easing of travel rules in the National Capital Region. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. The Philippines envoy to the United States will get more than enough doses of Moderna COVID-19 vaccines. Philippine Ambassador to Washington, D.C., Jose Manuel Romualdez, confirmed on Monday National Task Force Against COVID-19 Chief Implementer Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr.'s remarks that the country will get a steady supply of vaccines in the coming months. While noting slight delays due to logistical issues, he said vaccine deliveries will pour in starting July. About 300,000 doses of Moderna vaccines, which are part of the 20 million doses ordered by Manila, will arrive on June 27. Around 7 million of the 20 million Moderna jabs were purchased by the private sector. Romualdez also assured that the U.S. is giving priority to the Philippines in securing Moderna vaccines. The Philippines is also set to receive more vaccine doses from the United States. This is after the Biden-Harris administration included Manila among the priority countries to receive a portion of the latest 55 million tranche of U.S. government-donated COVID-19 vaccine doses. The United States is sending an approximately 16 million of the 55 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to Asia, including the Philippines, through the COVAX facility. Meanwhile, about 14 million vaccine shots will be shared directly with friends, allies, and other recipients, which also includes the Philippines. On top of donating a portion of its own supply, Biden earlier announced that the U.S. would purchase 500 million Pfizer doses and donate them to 92 low and lower middle income countries and members of the African Union. Staying with the vaccination program, President Rodrigo Duterte sends a strong message for those refusing to get the jabs: leave the country. In his talk to the people on Monday night, the chief executive vented out his frustration over the refusal of some people to get the vaccines, saying he only wants to uphold the common good of the people. He reiterated that everyone should get the shots as it is the only solution to end the pandemic. He also adds those who do not want to be vaccinated are potential carriers of the virus and puts others at risk.
Pero kung hindi kayo magpabakuna, umalis kayo sa Pilipinas. Go to India if you want, to somewhere, to America. But for as long as you are here and you are a human being and can carry the virus, magpabakuna ka. Otherwise, I will order all the barangay captains to have a tally of the people who refuse to be vaccinated. Because if you are a person na hindi ka vaccinated, you are a carrier of a potential carrier. And to protect the people, I have to sequester you in jail. May mamili kayo. Magpabakuna kayo o ipakulong ko kayo sa silda.
The public is obliged to wear face shields in public spaces. The issue of whether face shield will be scrapped or not has been put to an end as President Rodrigo Duterte decided to keep his policy amid the presence of the more transmissible Delta variant of COVID-19. The president earlier decided to ease the face shield requirement, but the health experts say it is still necessary for an added layer of protection. Meanwhile, the president also heeded their advice, citing the need to be more cautious over the highly infectious Delta coronavirus variant. President Duterte said the small inconvenience of wearing face shields is a small price to pay to prevent impending disaster.
I will apologize to the Filipino people that this thing was being discussed openly, and many thought that we were ready to do away with the face masks. We must triple our effort, because I said we do not know if it would require a new vaccine which has to be invented first. And second, we cannot afford a second wave because it might be far worse than the first. And then you will have a problem of our economy, and I said it would be a disaster for the country.
No face-to-face classes yet, as President Rodrigo Duterte said he would not gamble school children's health. The president thumbed down the proposal of the Department of Education to resume the physical classes in areas with low risk of COVID-19 transmission due to the threat of the Delta coronavirus variant.
Ma'am, we might differ in our opinions about the matter, but for as long as there is really no vaccination, I cannot gamble on the health of the children. I hope you'd understand.
DepEd Secretary Leonor Briones said her department fully accepts the decision of the president and will fully abide by the knowledge of the medical experts. She also assured that the DepEd will stay prepared for the possible reopening of classes just in case COVID-19 cases decrease. She said DepEd would use technology to deliver classes for the upcoming school year.
We don't have any reservations because we all know the effect, and especially the idea, Mr. President, of having also our children vaccinated, because we are told that children are now more prone and perhaps are vulnerable, and we would not want to risk 27 million children and our teachers. And besides, we are part of the executive, and what the executive decides, we support and we cooperate, especially on a professional matter as this, Mr. President. So we are withdrawing our requests in the light of your decision, and we accept fully your decision.
The Philippines and Saudi Arabia shared their commitment to protect and uphold the rights and welfares of overseas Filipino workers in the kingdom. Both countries also expand their cooperation in addressing the challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. Special Envoy of the President Robert Borge personally turned over the letter of President Rodrigo Duterte for His Majesty King Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud, the custodian of the two holy mosques. In the letter, President Duterte recognized His Majesty the King for its efforts to achieve equitable and affordable COVID-19 vaccines. The President also expressed his gratefulness for including the Filipino nationals in their vaccination program. Still to come, tired of quarantine classifications, we might have to wait longer, as the Health Department says easing this won't happen overnight. And free trade agreements are seen to open more opportunities in the country's construction industry. Details ahead. This is the PNA Newsroom. The COVID-19 pandemic has greatly changed our lives for the worse. Lives and jobs were lost and economies reached a meltdown. Thanks to the arrival of safe and effective vaccines, we are one step closer to normalcy. It's time to do our part, get vaccinated for our safety and for our recovery.
You are there in that community, go there and have yourself vaccinated by any of the vaccines available. They are all potent, they are all effective. I would like to appeal to all our kababayans, please get vaccinated against COVID-19 and be the government partner in preventing further spread of the disease. I encourage you to get vaccinated as soon as possible time. These vaccines are safe and they are the key to reopening our society. The need for international solidarity and cooperation cannot be made clearer than this pandemic, because everyone is safe. No one is safe globally until everybody is safe.
Vaccines work. The Department of Health said the easing or scrapping of community quarantine classifications in the country is less likely to happen immediately. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere confirmed the Interior Undersecretary Epemaco Densing's statement over the weekend that the national government officials are discussing the easing of quarantine qualifications. She emphasized that this needs a plan as to when the gradual easing of restrictions would start, after which they would leave the decision on lockdowns or community quarantines to the local officials. This is to ensure that when implementation of quarantine classifications are shifted to them, they are safeguards and no risk of having further transmission. Vergere also said it needs proper implementation to avoid the risk of unreasonable closing down of areas by the local governments. Currently, the National Capital Region and Bulacan are under general community quarantine with some restrictions. Meanwhile, Rizal, Laguna, and Cavite are also under GCQ but with heightened restrictions. President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday warned of defying a possible court order to suspend quarantine protocols in Cebu. This after two Cebu-based lawyers filed a petition seeking to stop the enforcement of the 10-day quarantine for overseas Filipino workers and returning overseas Filipinos or ROFs to Cebu. Duterte stood by the quarantine policy of his pandemic response team, asking the courts not to issue an order to stop the policy. The president also ordered the Department of the Interior and local government to decide on Cebu Governor Gwendolyn Garcia's travel protocols in the province. He recognized the burden on ROFs who had to pay for their 10-day quarantine. Previously, Malacanang ordered to divert international flights bound for Mactan Cebu International Airport to Ninoy Aquino International Airport from May 29 until June 5 amid Cebu's deviation of the IATF's travel protocols. The suspected mastermind of the Yellow Bus Line bus burning incident in January and early this month, both in North Cotabato, was arrested in Kidapawan City on Monday morning. Suspect Ali Akbar was nabbed by joint police and military elements in Purok 3, Barangay East, Patadon. Brigadier General Roberto Capulong, commander of the 602nd Infantry Brigade, said Akbar is an explosives expert and an extortionist belonging to the Dawla Islamiyah Hassan group. The court has issued an arrest warrant against Akbar for double murder and multiple frustrated murder. Authorities seized 2 IEDs, a burning cap, IED components, and an Islamic State of Iraq and Syria flag from Akbar. On January 27, an improvised bomb went off beside a YBL unit in Tulunan Town, killing a roadside fruit vendor and injuring 3 others. On June 3, a YBL unit was burned in Barangay Bialong, Emlang, killing 3 passengers who got trapped. All resorts in Bataan have been temporarily closed down as the province is placed under modified enhanced community quarantine. Meanwhile, authorities in Dumaguete called on residents to report violations of quarantine rules. Marita Mawahe has the story.
The Provincial Tourism Office on Monday announced the temporary closure of all inland and beach resorts in Bataan as it moves from modified general community quarantine to modified enhanced community quarantine. President Rodrigo Duterte last week placed Bataan under the stricter quarantine status upon recommendation of the IATF due to a spike in the number of COVID-19 cases. In the town of Samal, Mayor Aida Macalinaw immediately met with the owners of resorts to discuss the temporary closure. The management of Raven Resort in Abukay Town meanwhile said they already stopped accepting guests last March and instead opened their hotel rooms as a quarantine facility for medical frontliners. Meanwhile, the city government of Dumaguete has advised residents to report violations of the health protocols to the Emergency Operations Center or EOC. The city's interagency task force said COVID-19 related reports and queries will be accommodated through its hotlines. The EOC will address and respond to reports on violations of the minimum health standards and the protocols by persons or business establishments, travel requirements, follow-up requests for transportation of COVID-19 patients, and other related concerns. Negros Oriental and this capital city is under MECQ from June 16 to 30. In Surigao del Sur, the provincial government and the city government of Bislig distributed food aid to tricycle and pedicab drivers affected by the continuing implementation of MECQ. The entire province will be under MECQ until June 30 due to the increase in COVID-19 infections. Over 2,600 drivers received food packs containing 3 kilos of rice and 9 canned goods. As of June 20, Bislig City has a total of 1,145 COVID-19 cases with 920 recoveries, 170 remaining active cases, and 55 deaths, based on the latest data from the city government. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
In our business news, the country's free trade agreements or FTAs have opened more opportunities overseas for Philippine construction industry. During the virtual conference of the Philippine Overseas Construction Board on Monday, Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez said through the FTAs, the government has secured liberal arrangements in foreign markets for local construction services. These arrangements include 100% foreign equity participation in construction activities, such as general construction work for buildings and civil engineering. He said the Philippines' participation in free trade agreements is providing an avenue to allow greater economic activity and job creation. The trade chief said exploring these opportunities overseas will also help construction-related enterprises to recover due to the impacts of the pandemic. Up next, General Santos City steps up its fight against dengue. And more tourists are trooping to the country's summer capital, Baguio City, as travel rules are eased. Back after a quick break, stay with the PNA Newsroom. You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. An indigenous peoples representative called on left-leaning organizations to stop deceiving the Manobo tribe, particularly to recruit minors to join the armed movement against the government. Datu Rico Maca, indigenous peoples mandatory representative of San Miguel, Surigao del Sur, called out those who claimed the 3 fatalities in a firefight in Barangay Yatagan, Lianga on June 15 were not New People's Army but plain civilians. Manobo tribal leaders appealed for respect of IP's customary laws from those claiming that the fatalities were just victims of militarization. Maca, however, denied that the IP communities were being maltreated by the military. He lamented that communist rebels are the ones destroying the lives of the IP communities by putting up schools as a recruitment haven for the NPA. Maca said Manobo tribal leaders and the IP themselves are really longing to end insurgency and live peacefully in their areas. Health personnel in General Santos City have intensified their surveillance against the deadly dengue fever as cases continue to increase in various communities in the past several weeks. Mary Rose Ann Aloot of the City Health Office said they already recorded 26 barangays, a total of 737 dengue cases, with 8 related deaths since January 1 this year. The figure is about 104% higher than the 362 cases with 5 confirmed deaths reported in the same period last year. Most of the cases involved children aged 10 years old. Aloot advised residents to observe the 4S strategy against dengue set by the Department of Health, namely, search and destroy mosquito breeding sites, secure self-protection measures, seek early consultation, and support fogging or spraying only in hotspots. Those with high fever, severe headache, rashes, and other possible symptoms should immediately seek for help. Hotel owners and managers have stressed the need for vaccination in the eventual recovery of the tourism industry as health and safety become the primary travel influence among tourists. Hotel Sales and Marketing Association or HSMA Chair Margarita Munsayak said achieving mass vaccination is a positive sign, especially for the beleaguered hospitality sector. She said vaccination would not only bring back confidence to travel, but also pave way for the reconsideration of inbound leisure travel. Hotels currently make do with serving local travelers, businessmen, and persons in quarantine. Some hotels have also sought certificates to become multi-use hotels, which can accept both guests staying for business and those undergoing quarantine. Meanwhile, HSMA announced it will proceed with its Virtuous Awards to recognize hotels that still cater to their guests' needs despite the limits posed by the pandemic. The awarding will take place on October 26, 2021. Baguio City has logged more tourist arrivals this June following the easing of travel restrictions in the National Capital Region or NCR. Records from the City Tourism Office show 1,400 visitors recorded on the first week of June and nearly 3,000 for the second week. City Tourism Officer Engineer Aloysius Mapalo said many people are already bored and eager to travel. He added that people's desire for travel continues despite the rainy season. Eileen Refuerzo, chief of the city's Public Information Office, also said people are taking advantage of the Tourism Promotions Board's subsidized antigen test. With the subsidy, tourists would only pay a testing fee of 350 pesos at the city's central triage at the Baguio Convention Center. Meanwhile, all resorts in Negros Occidental and Bacolod City will be closed during the feast day of St. John the Baptist on June 24 as part of measures to curb the continued rise of COVID-19 cases. Governor Eugenio Jose Lacson ordered the closure of all beaches, resorts, and water parks on June 23, 24, and 25. In Bacolod, Mayor Evelio Leonarda issued an order suspending public celebrations such as excursions, picnics, revelries, and other similar activities. Leonardo said the Department of Health Western Visayas has classified Bacolod as a high-risk area for COVID-19. Also, the traditional water splashing during the San Juan feast is prohibited. The National Historical Commission of the Philippines, or NHCP, turned over on Monday to the provincial government of Pangasinan the Casa Real after its full restoration. Casa Real is a historical landmark of Lingayen, being the former seat of government during the Spanish regime in the country. NHCP Chairman Rene Escalante said the landmark was a witness to the rich, glorious, and even sad history of the town and the province. Governor Amando Espino III said Casa Real, which will later on become a museum, will enable Pangasinenses to appreciate history and give back to the next generation. Espino admitted that the provincial government will be needing funds to materialize the planned museum for the historical landmark. He said they are also in coordination with Pangasinense artists for the artworks to be displayed in the planned museum. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. Not wanting to get vaccinated, President Rodrigo Duterte says those refusing the jabs are free to leave the country, saying they are potential coronavirus carriers. It's final, the use of face shields will remain as the country tightens measures to prevent the spread of more transmissible COVID-19 variants. Waiting for the scrapping of quarantine classifications? Not so fast, as the Health Department says. This long-term goal needs a well-orchestrated plan to prevent another surge of infections. And reviving tourism, Baguio City logs more tourist arrival following the easing of travel rules in the National Capital Region. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day to all.